Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. We are continuing in our study on insights for a full life in a broken world, and that is where Solomon has turned us, and we're nearing the end of this chapter. And Solomon has some more insight for us, and he's going to change his perspective. But think of me, or with me, as we look at the life of a man named Jim Elliot. He was a bright and athletic and passionate young man. He was a gifted writer and an excellent speaker. He was a rising student at Wheaton College, and he had every opportunity before him. He could have succeeded in almost any professional field, but rather than pursue comfort or acclaim, he followed a higher calling. And that was to take the gospel to the unreached Auca, and now they're called the Huarani tribe in Ecuador. They were people who were known for their isolation and for violence. Jim, along with 4 other missionaries, invested months learning the language, making contact, and praying for an open door. And in January of 1956, they landed their small plane near the tribe's territory. And just days later, all 5 men were speared to death on a sandy riverbank. And to many, it looked like a waste. 5 strong, wise, skillful men gone. And the race wasn't to the swift. The battle was not to the strong. The bread was not given to the wise. Their lives from an earthly point of view ended by time, chance, and people. But the story didn't end there. Jim's wife, Elizabeth Elliot, would later return to the very tribe that killed her husband, and this time with their toddler daughter. And the tribe that once rejected the gospel eventually embraced Jesus and welcomed Elizabeth and her daughter. Many came to faith, and today, Jim Elliot's words echo like a prophetic summary of Ecclesiastes chapter 9. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Have you ever been there? Not necessarily in the dire circumstances that these missionaries were, but at some point in time, you had planned, you had prepared, you laid everything out in order, and seemingly your plans and efforts could not fail, but out of nowhere, beyond your thinking and anticipation, either time, chance, people, or all 3 combined blew it up. And you found yourself saying, how in the world could this have happened? My plans and efforts were foolproof. The truth is, they were not time, chance, or people proof. Nothing in this world is. We would be wise to learn this. When we began our study in chapter 9, we established Solomon's theme was insights for living a full life in a broken world. And he established for us in verse 1 that we need to recognize God is in control and we need to trust Him. Everything is in His hand. He sees the end from the beginning. He reminds us once again in verses 2 through 6 that life is fleeting by urging us, don't waste your life. Death is certain. And then he turned us to defining a full life in verses 7 through 10 by giving us God-approved imperatives for living and that is teaching us to focus on what matters and to enjoy the everyday things in life. And in those, Solomon called us to embrace the simple, everyday joys, meals, moments, marriage, and meaningful work. And then after giving us the 4 imperatives for living well, Solomon now brings us down to earth. Why? Because our joy must live within the reality of time, chance, and difficulty. Just when things seem to be going smoothly, time, chance, the difficulties that we face, people, they intervene, plans fall apart, strengths fail, and outcomes don't match our efforts. And in these last verses, Solomon now turns our eyes to this sobering reality, not to discourage us, but to deepen our trust in the God who is not bound by time or hindered by chance and people. And so even when life seems unpredictable, God remains God, faithful, unshaken, and carrying out His plan. And this brings us to the 4th main insight for living a full life in a broken world. And that is, life is limited by time, chance, and people. God is not. And we'll focus on verses 11 and 12 this morning as Solomon turns us back to more wisdom-based thinking as we learn this together. Understand this, even when life feels unpredictable and out of control, God is still sovereign. Though time and chance affect everyone, we are called to trust God's hand and live wisely, joyfully, and urgently in light of eternity. There were a couple of good observations that I read as I was looking at these passages here. One is this: the very randomness of life is a part of its message. What better way to make us drop our pretensions and confess our need of God? A great observation that Kidner made. Wiersbe said this: God has a time for everything, but we can't read His calendar. Life appears to be unfair. It's not what you know or who you are, but who you know that seems to make the difference. And so let's look at these verses together, and we'll take them apart this morning, and we aren't going to get beyond my introduction, and that's okay. Look at them with me, verses 11 and 12. Solomon says, I returned and saw under the sun. And what is he saying? He's saying this: he moved away from this imperative-based writing back to his under the sun observation. It's Solomon's way of describing life from a more cynical tone or a worldview that is through human eyes rather than those of the divine. And so he says, I return to this under the sun observation. And now he's going to give kind of a series of proverbs here. And it helps us to understand, and if you want to make a little note there in your Bible, you can. But it helps to understand the word always in there. For instance, the race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet the bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happeneth to them all. For man also knoweth not his time, as the fishes that are taken in an evil net, and as the birds that are caught in the snare. So are the sons of men snared in an evil time, when it falleth suddenly upon them. As I return with Solomon to this under the sun view, my mind was just buzzing with questions and contrasts. And we just finished the imperative of celebrating work and doing it with our might and even considering it as an act of worship. But we also considered the danger of ambition. And boy, do we see ambition touched here as well. But we find that ambition has serious enemies, and that is time and chance. And so we find in verse 11 5 abilities and 5 under-the-sun pursuits, with the ending phrase telling us that time and chance happen to them all. Understand, beloved, there's nothing wrong with developing our abilities. But keep in mind, though, that they're to be used as tools in the pursuit of a full life. The issue is where and how I am focusing those abilities and my expectations of the outcome. So what are these pursuits? How do they contrast to the full life? Well, look back with me. We see the first of them is race. The race. The pursuit of achievement. You've got to be the fastest or the first or the most successful. Life is a competition. And boy, we see it today. Whether it's climbing the corporate ladder or trying to outrun others in a career, the pursuit of wealth or pursuit of social status. I've got to be the best. I have to be achieving the most. I've got to be able to post that on my social media. I've got to draw attention. The world is filled with this. As I thought about the full life that we just looked at, rather than racing through life, what does God say? Sit and eat your bread with joy. Savor life instead of sprinting past it. Consider this. Are you racing through life to get ahead, only to miss the joy of where God has already placed you? You ever stop to think about that? We can be so forward visioned. This is where I see my life ending. This is where I want to go. And we're so focused on that, we just race through life and we miss all that God has for us. And we're tempted to see everything that we encounter until we get to that point as an obstacle that has to be gone around or removed. The pursuit of achievement. Look at the next. We see that the battle is not to the strong, the pursuit of power. To be strong, to be in control, to win the battles of influence or politics or reputation. Maybe we find ourselves just aggressively asserting ourselves, or we've got to dominate in an argument, or we've got to control outcomes in our life. Maybe instead of fighting for control, I thought back to the full life of enjoying your everyday marriage. God calls us to enjoy life with the wife that we love. A relationship over rivalry, right? We look at this and we can ask, what battles are you fighting that God never asked you to win? We like to take up battles. We like to pick up arms for the cause. But are there battles that we are going after that God hasn't said they're yours? We also see in this that the pursuit of security. We see that in verse 11. Neither yet bread to the wise. And so we do whatever it takes to provide. We hoard. We never want to lack. We live for the paycheck. We overwork ourselves. We find ourselves always anxious about having enough. Boy, back in verse 7, we're reminded, rather than anxiously scrambling for bread, God says what? God now accepteth thy works. If we just pursue the full life and let God fill it. We understand then that He's our provider, and we can rejoice. We don't have to live in strife for the pursuit of security, just being secure. We also see in riches the pursuit of prosperity. We've got to have. We've got to have more. More is better. Wealth equals success. Boy, we live in a society like that, don't we? We look at somebody who is made of millions, and I just read over the last couple of weeks, I can't remember, I think it was like $50 billion that Bill Gates just emptied out of his bank account because he doesn't want to die with money in his bank account. Noble pursuit that he's doing. I don't believe he's saved. But we would look at a man like that and the wealth that he accumulated. At one time, he was in I believe, the top 5 richest people in the world. And we say, oh, the success. No. But boy, we pursue investments and possession. We're caught up in consumerism, hoping that our money, our possessions, will secure and bring happiness. And Solomon contrasts that, verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Work hard, not for riches, but because it honors God and it brings meaning. If God chooses to increase you, then praise the Lord. There's nothing evil about riches. There's nothing wrong with having money. Right? The Bible doesn't say that money is the root of all evil, does it? Sometimes we treat it that way. What is it? It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. Think about this. If your bank account emptied tomorrow, would your sense of worth collapse with it? See, the pursuit of recognition and favor. We have to be liked. We've got to be admired. We have to be promoted. We find our worth in the applause and the approval of others. I mean, is it not a wonder that social media is just a craze today? I'm not bashing on you if you post on Facebook or Instagram, okay? But if that's your pursuit, if you've got to be recognized, there's a problem there. Sometimes it comes down to people pleasing. I just have to please people. I can't say no. Or everything's about reputation. And our reputation is important in the aspect of having a good and right testimony, being people of integrity. Boy, instead of chasing favor, what does Solomon do in verse 8? He reminds us to let our garments be white, to just pursue a pure life of joy and walking and relishing in God's approval. So we look at that and we have to ask, whose approval am I working for? And will it matter 100 years from now? And so Solomon, he lays out these pursuits, but let's look at the other side of the proverb where Solomon is pointing out the abilities that are focused on the pursuits. And this begs an observation question. As I was looking at this and just weighing it out in my mind, I found myself asking, how am I using my abilities, and am I measuring a full life by their outcomes? So let's look at these quick hotshot lessons from these proverbs. Let's go back to the beginning of them. We see the swift, and what does that remind us? That speed does not guarantee victory. The race is not to the swift. It's not always to the swift. And this is referring to physical swiftness, such as running or quick movement. You know, it's the Olympic sprinter who trains and he's ready for that race. And perhaps he even is in the final race. And as the gun sounds and he takes off from the block, we find him crumbling to the ground. Why? Because his Achilles tendon has just torn. Think about it. His training was perfect. But the timing of the injury ended his career. Unpredictable, right? A misstep. And it negated his natural advantage. But sometimes we think, if I'm the fastest, if I'm the best, even if you're the fastest or the most prepared, unexpected setbacks can stop your progress. We see in the next phrase, the strong. And strength does not ensure success. And the picture is just a mighty warrior, a valiant fighter. It's used even in displays and descriptions of heroic strength. I'm reminded of a little boy in Scripture, a young man, who walked out on the battlefield and faced a man 9 foot tall. And Goliath stood undefeated, the champion of the Philistines. But one stone from a shepherd boy ended his life. You think about the time David had been prepared for a time such as this, right? And from a human view, though, David winning with a sling was unexpected and improbable. I mean, Saul didn't expect it. David did. But Saul didn't expect it, did he? What did he do? Oh, here's my armor. You've got to have something to go into battle with. But think about this. You can be powerful, but a small thing can undo all human advantage. Boy, I thought of Jeremy, the father back in Indianapolis, who was in his 40s, early 40s, and incredibly healthy man. And yet a tiny virus invaded his body and got into his lungs in July of 2021. The corona Delta virus. And before we realized, Jeremy was on a ventilator, and very shortly after, Jeremy was at home with the Lord. You see, beloved, strength does not ensure success. Wonderful ability, right? Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have these abilities. We shouldn't develop them. But we can't trust in them. Wisdom does not guarantee provision. Bread is not always to the wise. and our ability to apply knowledge. You can be the most brilliant of people. Perhaps you're a brilliant businessman, and you create a revolutionary idea, and you launch it just before the market crashes. We look at it and say, oh, it's the worst time, right? It was either too soon or too late. We look at the chance. How in the world could we predict an economic collapse? It's out of His control. But the truth is this, beloved, even the wise have to admit that they can't control timing or outcomes. We find that insight does not ensure riches. Riches to men of understanding. We can try to predict. I mean, I love my financial advisor. He's a wonderful man. I trust him. But you know what? All of the things that I've entrusted into his hands and all of the models that he looks at and he analyzes and he predicts. Tomorrow, beloved, I could open up my investment accounts and they could be vastly different from what they were on Friday. You see, insight doesn't always ensure riches. You know, perception is valuable, but it can't eliminate all uncertainty or ensure prosperity. And then we see that talent does not ensure favor. Oh, the men of skill. This implies a hands-on excellence or an ability to specialize. It's used throughout the description of putting the tabernacle together. God had gifted particular people in the building of the tabernacle with a specialization and excellence in the areas in which they served. You know, skill can be hidden, can be overlooked, or can even be outpaced by lesser talents due to bad timing or external favor. The truth is, beloved, all of these abilities, speed, strength, wisdom, insight, skill, they can be overcome by factors beyond our control. Time, or the progression of life, and chance, life's unpredictability, are universal equalizers. And so if we measure a full life by the expected outcomes, we're going to live in continual disappointments. Wrong pursuits combined with life's limits will trap us, and time will pass before we know it, and we will find ourselves living in regret. We'll find ourselves back at our recent illustration, living the Eeyore life. Cynical, critical, complaining, cantankerous. This brings us to another observation question as I was looking and meditating on the text, and that is this: how do I view time and chance? It's a hard question. It's a hard question to ponder when we've diverted from the full life to a filled life. Or when we live in selfish ambition and deviate from or try to accomplish a full life our way instead of God's way. Now, does that mean that we're doomed to misery? No. Does it mean that we can't live a full life now? No. But does it mean that we have to answer the question, how do I view time and chance? Yeah. You see, from an under the sun perspective, or what we would call a temporal perspective, one that is bound by time and space. Time passes, it moves forward, it doesn't stop. We can't stop it. I'm sorry. Listen, you may want to be 30 forever. It ain't happening. You may want your little ones to be this tall forever. Maybe not. But it ain't happening. Time passes. Its seasons come and go. It's measured but not predictable. Its end is always closer, but its end is unknown. Chance seems random and abrupt. It can cause us to be anxious. It can bring discouragement and defeat. It feels like a snare that traps us. And these observations can be very depressing if we walk away from the passage without any further consideration. But we still haven't answered the question. Now, from an earthly, human, temporal perspective, do all of these observations ring true? Sure. But how do you view time and chance? Do we look at them as adversity and obstacle to overcome, or do we look at them as tools of God's grace and guidance in our lives? Here's the truth about God that we need to latch onto if we're going to live a full life. God knows the details of both time and chance in your life. God is eternal and not bound by time. God is not surprised, nor does He wring His hands over occurrence in your life. Nothing is outside of His knowledge or plan. And we must remember as well that there is an enemy at work who uses time and chance to his advantage as he wages war against us. I love what Bob Roberts stated this week, and he stated it so well, it's worth quoting. But he said that this world is broken, and not just in obvious ways, crime, disease, war, addiction, but in a deeper, darker way. It's broken because it's under the influence of supernatural evil. We live in a world that is groaning, fractured under the weight of rebellion, death, and deception. And the Bible makes it clear Satan is not a fictional boogeyman or a metaphor for bad vibes. He is real, he is personal, he is vicious, and he is strategic, and he deals in the currency of ideas and is a master influencer. Don't get mad and bitter at God. That's exactly what the enemy wants. Satan is the ultimate gaslighter. He orchestrates chaos and suffering in the shadows, manipulates human systems for the fallout. And like a wicked arsonist pointing at the fire he started and accusing the firemen of negligence, he stokes the flames and then poisons our hearts with doubt. This is the oldest trick. In the garden, he twisted God's words and motives. Did God really say? And God knows that if you eat of it, you will be like him. The insinuation, God is holding out on you. God can't be trusted. And fast forward to today, and it's the same whispered lie, only now it comes in the wake of a cancer diagnosis, a miscarriage, a betrayal, a suicide. He says, see what happened? That's God's fault. If he really loved you. But here's the truth. God is not the author of evil. He is the healer, the redeemer, the rescuer. While Satan seeks to devour, God sent his Son to deliver. At the cross, Jesus exposed the full ugliness of Satan's schemes and triumphed over him. That doesn't mean suffering disappears, but it does mean this: your suffering is not senseless and it is not the end of the story. If you've been wounded by this world, don't run from God, run to him. Don't believe the gaslight. Don't confuse the smoke of Satan's fire with the light of God's love. Ask Job, ask Joseph, ask Jesus. God is not the problem, He is the promise. He is not your accuser, He is your advocate. He is not withholding good, He gave His Son. Wow. That was a great sermon in a little post. Listen, life may feel out of control, but that doesn't mean God is. He's not just aware of your time and chance, He governs them. And so we need to view time and chance as gracious gifts from God to us, even as Satan may use them to do battle with us. Sometimes they may serve as a divine guidance toward a full life in His will. Sometimes they may serve as divine chastisement to bring us back to a full life in His will. Sometimes they may serve as divine reminders to bring us to gratitude for His gracious gifts and guidance that will bring even more fullness to our life. Sometimes they may serve as divine house cleaning to remove things from our life that could be harmful or distracting. Sometimes they serve as divine allowances to recognize our limits and weaknesses and to draw us close to His side. Listen, beloved, you don't need to see the full path to trust the one who maps it. And this is Solomon's emphasis all the way back in verse 1 and verses 7 through 10 and here as well. Only a life lived in the perspective of God's sovereignty and lived with gratitude for His gifts brings true fullness. Life is filled with uncertainties. Time and chance will disrupt us without warning. But for the believer, life is not ruled by randomness. God is not surprised by anything that surprises us. Time and chance are not our enemies. They're tools in the hand of a wise and loving God. He is eternal. He is sovereign. And most of all, He is good. And when life unravels, He remains the same. We may not understand every detail, but we can trust the one who holds every detail in His hands. Would you bow your heads with me for a moment? We consider with me as Rachel comes and plays a verse of invitation. Christian, where are you placing your confidence? Is it in your speed, your strength, your wisdom, or favor, or in the God who created time and already knows what we see as chance? Don't trade the fullness of God's joy for the frustration of worldly pursuits. Surrender your ambitions to His purpose. Recenter your life on His will. Trust Him with both your timing and your unknowns. Maybe you're saying it's too hard to find His will. I've been away from it for way too long. The answer, dear friend, is easy, but the application may be hard. You may not be able to go back and change some things. Our choices have consequences, but the truth is you can be obedient now. And so what areas that you know you ought to be obedient, even the simple things, are you being disobedient? Confess them to Him this morning and then obey Him. Lord, I've been disobedient to You in this area. I've been living on my own abilities. Lord, I'm giving these things back to you. Forgive my disobedience. I want a full life. I want to live in your will. I'm going to obey you from this day forward. Yeah, but my spouse or my children, people at work, my time, my circumstances, you're right. That may be some of the hard part. But the truth is this, you cannot get to God's will outside of obedience. Give it to him today. Listen, if you're listening this morning and you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, maybe you've been trying to secure your own outcome, to run your own race or to win your own battles, and you already know how empty that can feel. Perhaps in that emptiness, you're feeling Jesus call out to you. Don't resist his loving call. Run to him. Life is short, it's unpredictable, and it's often unfair. But Jesus Christ offers you a life that is eternal, unshakable, and full. Will you come to him today? Trust him. Trust in his finished work on the cross and begin walking in the fullness that only he can give. If God's speaking to you, and you need to trust Christ today, I hope that you'll reach out to somebody next to you. When we dismiss, shake my hand, say, I need help, I need prayer. But don't leave this morning without Christ. Don't leave this morning living an empty life as a believer when you can come to him and trust him with every detail. I'll ask the men to come as we prepare for the table this morning.